You've likely seen YouTube videos before that only consist of a talking head for the entire video, and let's be honest, it's just boring, at least as long as you're not as entertaining as Peter McKinnon or so. So what your videos need to be way more interesting to watch is B-roll footage that shows whatever you're talking about. Let it be a product, travel experiences, your cat, or whatever you want. If you only talk about something without showing what you're talking about, it is far less engaging. So in this tutorial we will find out how to do so, and don't worry, you don't need the very best camera or gear for it, but being able to change lenses or at least zooming in is definitely an advantage. Okay, to get started you need to know what shots you need to get and how to do it. And the one thing that you should always ask yourself when shooting your B-roll is if and how you can tell small sub-stories with your shots. And this is exactly what I just did. I'm in a cafe here, and before this talking head shot of me started, I showed you a sequence on how I got here. Now the sequence has nothing to do with the topic of this video, but because it is connected to the talking head shot, it actually feels completely right. And you see this technique actually quite often on YouTube, for example in Sam Calder's Inspire 2 video on the bridge, or also in Aidan Robbins' videos when he enters his car, for example. So let's have a look at what I did here exactly, because even if the B-roll sequence has nothing to do with what I'm talking about, the way how I shot it is exactly the same as I would shoot other sequences. So what I did here is that I simply broke down the process of getting to the cafe in multiple steps. The steps were first arriving with a motorbike, then walking away from the motorbike, third shot going up to the stairs to the cafe, that's where I reveal where I go by using a wide angle, then taking the coffee inside for the fourth shot, and last shot sitting down at a table outside. As you can see, in the beginning the viewer doesn't really know what's going on because I used close shots that only showed a small part of the scene. And that spikes interest because the viewer wants to know where I'm going and what I'm doing, what I reveal afterwards. But breaking an activity down into single steps is just one way to create B-roll sequences. Another one that's especially good for product B-roll is to only show a tiny bit of a product or something else before revealing it. In this example I used macro shots at the beginning to show parts of a microphone before I reveal the final product. So again, that makes the viewer interested in what it is. Then there's also the 5-shot method, which kind of guarantees that you get all the shots you need for a sequence. The 5-shot method works as follows. You first capture a wide shot of where something is happening, then you capture a close shot of what is happening, then a close shot of the character's face while he performs the activity of the shot before, so the who. And after that you take another shot where you show the character and whatever he does in one shot. Finally, you finish the sequence with a few more shots that come into your mind while looking at whatever is going on. That can be more than just one shot, and it can also be shots of the surrounding area that you can put in between the other shots. So here you can see the first 4 shots I got, and I put another shot of the surrounding in between just to deliver the feeling of the location. And then at the end I put another shot from the drone to show the outcome of the sequence. But as you can see, these first 4 shots are already enough to build a sequence, and the rest was just to enhance it. So just keep these first 4 shots in mind and then capture a few more to add your own taste. Now, storytelling with B-roll is not just about what you film, but also how you film it. Because the way you film things can greatly change the feeling of a shot. Let's take this example where I filmed myself sitting around. In the first shot, I filmed myself from the bottom to let me appear bigger, while in the second shot, I filmed myself from the top so that I look small. So depending on your camera position, the shot can feel very different. Another example is camera shake. If you want your shot to look rough, to show action or a stressful situation, it makes sense to turn the stabilization of your camera off and add a bit of handheld shake. But if you want the shot to feel calm and peaceful, it's better to use stable shots. Of course, there are more ways to add certain emotions to your shots, but for YouTube or other social media platforms, this should be enough to get started. Just always ask yourself how the shot in the scene should feel, and then try to find ways to add this feeling to your footage. And what you can also do, of course, is to watch movies and look what they do there to make you feel a certain way for inspiration. Okay, so far we've covered what B-roll shots to get, what is actually important, as the word cinematic generally means telling stories and shooting videos with intention instead of getting random shots. But what most people here on YouTube consider as cinematic is usually good or professional looking footage. So how can you make your footage look good even if your camera is quite cheap? The first and most important thing to do is to expose your main subject correctly. That means that you should always shoot in manual mode to have full creative control, and then you simply make sure that your main subject doesn't look too dark or too bright by either adjusting your aperture, shutter speed or ND filter. More expensive cameras make it easier as they cover a higher dynamic range with 10-bit log codecs, what shows more detail in the dark and bright parts of the shot at the same time. But if you have a cheaper camera that can't do that, it's totally fine if the sky is overexposed behind a person to make the person's face look good, for example. The next thing that makes your shots look good is to use natural light in a proper way or to add artificial lighting. That generally means that you want to light your main subject in a way that adds dimension to the image, and that's often achieved by backlighting your subject to get a nice rim light effect, or to let the light come from the side to create shadows in the face that reveal detail. Of course, if you have multiple light sources, you can combine those to get the rim light effect and face detail at the same time. You can also Google the keyword Rembrandt lighting or lighting techniques to learn more about it. But it also matters what's going on in the background. Using light in a way that makes the background darker or brighter as your main subject is usually a good idea to separate it. But you can also choose a background that has different color as your main subject to create separation, and the rim light effect helps as well. Oftentimes you also have unwanted and distracting objects in the background. If that's the case, simply remove these objects, or if that's not possible, change the angle a bit or zoom a bit in to get the object out of the frame. Always remember that filmmaking is not just about what the viewer sees, but also what he does not see. But of course you don't only want to remove stuff from the frame, sometimes you also want to add things to it. And that's especially the case with foreground objects. If you can put anything right in front of the camera while keeping the focus on the subject, you add more depth to the shot and you make camera motion more visible. So always look for something you can put your camera behind to make your shots more interesting. And of course, only static shots can be a bit boring over time, so move your camera. That mustn't be big moves where you walk with the camera though. Usually only some slight pans or slides can already do the job. And as mentioned in the tip before, if you add a foreground object, even small camera motion becomes more noticeable. So you don't have to move it that much. Now, especially if you shoot at home, you don't necessarily need a camera slider to get smooth shots. You can also put your camera on a book, like I'm using a notebook here with those rings at the edge, and I can line up these rings with the edge of the table, and that makes it possible to get a really nice smooth slide shot here. And as you can see, the setup here is really cheap as well. I'm using the Sony ZV-E10 right now with a Samyang AF 35mm 1.8 to get nice bokeh in the background. And as you can see, even with a super cheap setup here and natural light coming from the window, I can get pretty good results. Now, adding camera motion can be a problem if you film yourself and you don't have anyone that helps you. That's why I often work with camera sliders like the SlidePods E and Pro from Moza or the G-Pon Micro 2 Plus. They are easy to set up and I can control them via app to quickly add some motion to my shots. Another tip I can give you is to use outstanding focal lengths. Most of the time people use focal lengths of 24, 35 and 50mm, so by using something like 75, 85 or even 135mm with a fast aperture instantly gives you shots that people don't see often. These focal lengths give you lots of bokeh and they bring the background closer to the subject, what gives them a really nice look, especially for portraits. But also super wide angle shots can be very interesting, especially if you go really close to things. Wide-angle lenses make forward and backward motion more visible, and they show a lot of the surrounding area, what can look pretty cool if used right. Now, when giving you all these tips, it's also important to say that you have to use them intentionally. Especially heavy bokeh and slow motion is often overused, so really ask yourself if it makes sense to blur out the background or if it's better to show the surrounding area from a storytelling perspective. And regarding slow motion, only use it in certain shots to emphasize them or to deliver a certain emotion at the right time instead of slowing every clip down. But what if you can't get certain shots for your videos? Maybe you just don't have the time or you don't have the right location, actors or equipment. Well, that's easily solved by using stock footage from our today's sponsor, ArtGrid. There are many stock footage sites, but ArtGrid really stands out because of its really high quality and cinematic footage. They also make it easy to find the right shots and even sequences by featuring footage from some of the world's most talented filmmakers. Let's say you want to show a sequence of a painter in a video about creativity. Then you can easily use shots from the daylight painting collection from Tamir Feingold, for example. Looks really good, right? Oh, and you probably noticed that I used his footage to build a 5-shot sequence as we talked about earlier in this video, so even that's possible. And for people like me that like to do a lot of color grading, they even offer their clips in ProRes, Log and RAW codecs. That makes it easy to match their stock footage to my own shots. That perfectly matches their licenses as well, because you cannot just use their footage for your own projects, but also for freelancing clients. So if you missed a shot for a commercial, don't worry, Artgood has you covered. I will leave a link to them in the description below, so check them out. Okay, now you shot all your B-roll footage, but it's also important what comes after that, because with all of those clips it can get pretty messy. So after the shoot, definitely build a proper folder structure to store all of your files. I generally do that by having separate folders for A and B-roll, the different locations where I filmed, and my different cameras. That allows me to find all the clips easily when I'm editing. I also have all my shots planned out before I shoot them, what makes it easy in the edit as I can arrange everything quickly in the timeline and cut it to the music just by reading my script. If you want more tutorials on how I plan and edit my videos, let me know in the comments below. I will also add a storytelling course to my existing videography courses at the beginning of 2022, so if you get the full access pass to my Learn with Pascal platform now, you will get the storytelling course without any additional costs as soon as I release it. So check Learn with Pascal, links are in the description below. And let's also talk about my own experience with shooting more B-roll footage, and this is actually very good because just a few months ago my YouTube channel was actually not doing that well. I didn't get as many views, etc. And instead of giving up, I really started to go hard to really script my videos and to make them more like short films instead of just the usual talking head tutorial stuff what everyone does. And since then my YouTube channel has really taken off again. So I think that really inserting more B-roll and doing more storytelling in general in your videos is really key for a successful channel today, because this is what no one does. It takes so much more time, it takes a lot more effort, and it usually means that you probably can't even publish one video per week even more. And this is what everyone is focused on here on YouTube. Like everyone tries to publish once a week or maybe even every day or 3 times a week or so. And of course, if you put so much effort into a video, that's not really possible anymore. But it's actually a good thing, because if you publish every week and your video gets maybe somewhere between 1,000 and 5,000 views, that's obviously not as good as publishing every 2 weeks, but then having a YouTube video that gets 10,000 or maybe even 100,000 of views. So I think that putting a bit more effort into your videos by shooting more B-roll and planning everything out is absolutely worth it, and it pays off in the long term. So as always, I hope this video was helpful. If yes, then leave me a thumbs up and also consider subscribing, and I hope to see you next week where I will do another color grading tutorial.